Oh, these creatures are definitely playing sinister games now. Leaving Randall alive after Boyd abandoned him and left him for dead, these creatures are definitely trying to break Boyd in every way that they possibly can and cause mass division within the town. With the whole of Fromsville on edge following the return of Tabitha and the new arrival of a police officer and Victor's father Henry, death was present. An insight into Victor's past and the mass slaughtering that occurred on a fateful night was there, and also the fear of there being no way out in the present day. With an episode that competes with the season premiere in terms of quality, let's jump into this week's installment and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is from Season 3, Episode 4, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Why the creatures left Randall alive. There are two main things that I feel have been going on throughout this season when it comes to the wider scale of the town. The first is that the creatures have made it known that they're trying to prove Boyd wrong from when he said that the town wouldn't break him. So slowly we're seeing them doing things that are getting inside of his head and making him reach breaking point. For example, the first thing was when Tianxian was killed right in front of him and they made him watch, because watching somebody that you care about die is more difficult than dying yourself, as was made apparent with the metaphor with the goat in the first episode. The crops have also been poisoned, which made them spoiled, which is something that I feel the creatures are also behind, meaning that people are going hungry and the mood is turning to frustration. And then, in this episode, the waitress creature went over to Boyd and gave him the keys to the ambulance that he was looking for so that he could get himself, Tabitha, Henry, and Jim to safety. But it meant that he had to leave Randall to the creatures, and in Boyd's mind, by doing that, he knew that he'd be killed. We were under the impression that Randall was going to be a goner. However, right at the end of the episode, the ambulance pulled up outside the house and Randall was on top of it in a state where he was still alive, something that the creatures don't usually do. They normally attack and kill. I believe they did this because it's going to tie into the second main thing that's been at the heart of this season and has had a main focus, which is the hope and togetherness that Donna spoke about and the importance of it being the very thing that they needed to have in order to survive. Slowly, we're seeing people's mindsets change due to the town being in the most fiercest and hostile conditions that it's been in for a long while. And with Randall being left alive and knowing that Boyd left him for dead, Randall is going to lose all loyalty to Boyd. The fact that Boyd left Randall for dead might also cause other people to turn on him and lose their loyalty because there won't be that sense of trust anymore. This will ultimately have a knock-on effect and cause division amongst the people and also contribute towards Boyd's mind breaking down even more. So it showed us that these creatures really do know what they're doing. Randall mentioned that they don't just aimlessly walk around at night. They have a structure and a routine that they follow. They're creatures of habit, so they clearly thought about what they were going to do and how they were going to execute it. One small touch that I thought was a nice touch was that when Nikki died due to her injuries, Boyd went off on one at the police officer that fired the shot, and Donna shouted at Boyd and told him to go upstairs. This was done because Donna didn't want to break down in front of everybody there. Other than Boyd, she's probably the next strongest person that there is, and the individual that people respect. So hearing her say the words, "I'm really scared," it was something that showed that the very hope that she spoke of only a couple of episodes back was starting to dwindle, and the creatures were winning. Earlier on in the episode, Randall said to Boyd how dying wasn't the worst thing that could happen to a person in that town, and now his worst fears have happened. He wasn't killed by the creatures, but he's been forced to live after the trauma that he suffered, whilst he's still probably going to be getting the hallucinations too. Victor's trip down memory lane. During this episode, we saw that Vic revisited the night that his mother, sister, and a large amount of the town were slaughtered by the creatures. It was a night that he'd buried deep within his mind due to the trauma that he endured and the sheer amount of death and devastation that was present. This was the day that he also met the boy in white. It was horrific looking at what the creatures did to the people of the town, and because of the large amount of bodies that were there, Vic didn't bury them, but he instead collected an item off of every individual and then buried that as it almost symbolized the person. However, once he was deep within his mind, he realized that there was one specific item that was missing. This was Jasper the puppet, something that belonged to a resident of the time called Christopher. Christopher ended up seeing the symbol and being driven to the point of insanity, almost like what we're seeing happening with Jade. But as well as that, it seems like the town's supernatural power had the ability of being able to possess Jasper and give it some kind of sentient ability. Vic wants to work out what happened on that night, as he was in the root cellar and didn't see any of it because his mother told him to stay there. So by finding Jasper, a survivor of the events from that night, he'll be able to get the answers that he's looking for. The town is changing in ways that Vic has never seen before, and with this mass slaughtering being something that's plaguing Vic's mind and being the very thing that he fears, I wonder if something as large-scale as that is going to take place and could potentially be on the horizon. What is happening to Fatima? Fatima has been on this pathway into darkness, and we're seeing her getting darker and darker. Nikki died in this episode, and the moment Fatima wanted to be alone with her body, I could tell where this was going. It was actually quite uncomfortable to watch because it was so gruesome, and the sound was just disgusting. Fatima upgraded from rotten crops and decided to taste the blood of a human and feast on that. I think Fatima is going to turn into one of those creatures. There was a line dropped in the previous episode where the origin of the creatures was in discussion, and it was said how they used to be human. The way Fatima is acting, she's either carrying something that is a creature, or she's going to turn into one, and I feel it could be the latter. Within this episode, Tilly mentioned how the crow flying into the house could have potentially been a sign, and I definitely think that's the case. Crows are said to be symbolic of rebirth and also death, but in this instance, if Fatima were to turn into one of those creatures, rebirth would make the most sense. So I think we're going to see her slowly turning over the coming episodes. Jim and the phone. Ethan answered the phone in this episode, and yep, you guessed it, Thomas was on the other end. The voice that was claiming to be Thomas told him that his mother was in an ambulance and that she needed help and that he couldn't be afraid. When Jim entered the room, he ripped the phone out of the wall, and when he did that, he realized that the phone wasn't even connected. There was no phone line that was present, which showed that the town's supernatural forces that were at play and him ripping it out of the wall meant absolutely nothing. If they wanted to find a way of reaching him or his family, it was going to happen. Thomas told Jim that they weren't his children anymore, which is almost insinuating that something's going to happen to them. Ethan is susceptible the most and does tend to walk off and do things that one usually wouldn't, like running out in the middle of the night. So I imagine something's going to happen to him in the coming episodes. Tabitha's return. Just like what we predicted at the end of the previous episode, Tabitha and the workers that were in the ambulance with her ended up back in the town due to the fallen tree and the crows being present in the sky. Tabitha ultimately managed to make it to the safe house because Jim and Boyd went and rescued her. There was an importance placed upon the similarities between herself and Vic's mother, and the more I'm looking at it, the more similar Vic's entire family and Tabby's entire family are. Vic's mother saw the boy in white and was considered to be the chosen one, and that's the very thing that Tabby is. Vic ultimately saw the boy in white, and so can Ethan. Vic also had a sister, and the same for Ethan in having Julie. It feels like Tabby's arc could potentially mirror what happened to Victor's mother and his sister, so I'm intrigued to see how the two families are going to be connected. I'm also interested in seeing how Victor is going to react when he finds out that his father is now in the town, somebody that he hasn't seen for almost 3 decades. My review of the episode. I thought this was a really good episode of the show. I think it's up there with the first episode, and it's probably the second best that we've had this season. It had the action that I think many of us had been craving for the past 2 episodes, and it also developed the plot forward in a way where there are going to be consequences for the entirety of the town moving forward, especially Boyd. The creatures in this episode were so haunting to look at, and the shriek that they emitted was just terrifying, and you quite literally felt it in your bones. It was done best when Boyd took the keys and we heard the creature shrieking in the distance, and we knew that at that point, Randall was toast. What this season is doing a really good job at is balancing out all of the stories, whether that be Boyd, Tabitha, Jim, Victor, and even Kenny. Kenny and Christy being in the forest was on the back burner in this episode, but there was still value to take away from it. For example, Jade opened up about seeing the symbol, we heard the noises outside of the huts, something that we still don't know about, and we also saw Kenny pretty much say that he'd lost all motivation for survival, because he originally had the fight within him because of his mother and father. And with them now being gone, it meant that he had no direction, so even though it didn't feature heavily, it still had great importance. That's what I like. Everything that we see has value, and it's not often that you get that much quality and detail in a show, so I commend it for that. In terms of the performances in this week's episode, it was quite an ensemble piece, but I would say that the characters Tabitha, Boyd, Randall, Vic, and Donna delivered the strongest performances. Seeing Vic's mind going to dark places and how it impacted him when he went there was a real experience, and you could see the pain that he was carrying as he was slowly unearthing it. I would also say that Donna's breakdown was a moment that was impressive to watch. She's usually so strong, so seeing a moment of weakness from her but still having the strength and thought for others and not doing it in front of them was a powerful moment. Next week's episode marks the halfway point of the season, and I know some people are going to think we're no closer to getting any answers, but I feel like this season is hopefully going to provide some more as we embark towards the finale. I'm just going to guess that it's going to be slowly drip-fed to us. All I can say for now is bring on the next episode. So, there you have it, from Season 3, Episode 4, Ending Explained. If you want to see every episode of From Season 3 being broken down, then click on the card in the top corner. There's a playlist there. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time and the stuff I just watch in my spare time. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.